Hello and welcome to a special Valentine's edition of College Talk Tuesday with Pearl and Andy Lockwood. I am not Pearl.
I'm not Andy, I'm Pearl, and this is my Valentine, Andy Lockwood.
Yes. Yes, I am. Okay, enough of that mushy-gushy stuff. So, Each week, Pearl and I talk about the latest in terms of college financial aid, college scholarships, college admissions. We are, as Pearl and I just said, on Valentine's Day, February 14th. There's a bunch of stuff happening for families with college-bound teens, both class of 2017, finishing off the financial aid process, as well as younger kids. So what we do is we take this opportunity to talk about all that stuff, and we always say, if you have any questions, just pop them right in comments. I will be looking at them on one of our devices here for anyone who's watching live, and then if you're watching this on the recorded replay version, then we will also be checking those comments and questions periodically too. So today we're going to talk a little bit about a divorced situation in terms of a little bit of a mess up on the FAFSA, possibly the CSS profile. This is an actual case study of a client. We won't, of course, divulge the names. I want also to talk a little bit about current events, because you were telling me a little bit about what's happening in terms of student loan forgiveness, which is a subject sadly near and dear to my heart. And I also want to talk a little bit about verification, because I've gotten a few few comments and questions about what that means right now, because this is sort of verification season, I guess.
And how alarmed or not you should be about getting verified. Excuse me.
Well, that was what I was going to talk about, but if you want to chime in.
No. Just wasn't sure where you were heading.
Okay, well.
You lead, I follow.
Trust me, we're Valentine's.
Yes,
yep.
I do.
Okay. Did you enjoy the flowers I got you?
I did. And the donut. Thank you.
Yeah. We have a tradition of a pink heart-shaped donut from Dunkin' Donuts. Yeah. Classy. Nothing but the best.
Absolutely.
All right. So talk a little bit about, as succinctly as you can.
I can
okay,
try.
because this is going to be a challenge, I know. Not just for you.
I understand.
So we have a client that who's divorced and has already filled out the financial aid forms and submitted them to, I believe, one out of several colleges only. And so you'll correct me on that.
But
and
had many more to go.
Okay, so the issue is that before I talked to her last week and we started working with her, but I said I'm probably going to. I'm definitely going to want to have Pearl take a look at your financial aid forms that you filed, because very frequently we find mistakes. And some of it is just because you don't know any better, some of it is just silly mistakes, very, very rarely, and then some of it is just sort of part of the inherent flaws of the system. So I think it's more of that third category than the other two, but let me just frame it, and then I'll let you describe the whole situation. So in the financial aid process, there's a 2-year look back at income. And what that means is that for people graduating 2017, the 2015 tax returns are in play. That's what the financial aid office wants to see. So this client was married in 2015, I believe, but then they got divorced in 2016. Is that accurate?
That's accurate, but they became separated at the end of 2015.
So things changed.
They filed joint returns in 2015, I think is what you're getting at.
Okay. So in other words, the general principle is that there's a snapshot from 2 years ago and things changed, and that's an inherent flaw in the system and the financial aid forms process. So I want you to talk a little bit about sort of the global stuff, and then the narrowly tailored, specific actions you took to kind of fix things for her.
Right.
And before I do that, I just want to say, if you're just joining us, one more time.
Happy Valentine's Day.
Happy Valentine's Day. Welcome to College Talk Tuesday, special Valentine's edition. And please drop a comment in, say hi, give us a like, give us a love for Valentine's Day. Let us know you're here. Please share this with anyone you think.
I have a fun little trivia game for however many of you are actually watching. If any of you can guess, and maybe I'm not the only one with this pet peeve, I have a pet peeve about sometimes how this particular holiday, Valentine's Day, is pronounced.
Oh, I can guess.
So no, you don't have to guess. I
want to.
you can give it at the end of our little show.
When we're almost out of time.
If everyone could just give a comment, what anyone might share with me, a pet peeve about how today's holiday is pronounced by some.
So it's like the equivalent of another thing that bothers her is
No.
when people say happy birthday.
Well, that's, no, okay. It's
similar.
It's not just that way, though.
It's similar.
It's a few other ways, but okay. Anyway,
right.
we'll move on.
Great.
So
it can only go up from here.
All right. So with divorced families, or separated families, and it is either, the information that is to be reported on the financial aid forms is the custodial parent's information, which means the parent with whom the child resides with greater than 50% of the time. And throughout the form, anything that is asking for parent should only be that custodial parent. Okay, so that's the way it is for the FAFSA. Only that one parent's income, and on the CSS profile, only that one parent's income. And then with respect to how your filing status was because you were divorced and whatever, in the CSS profile, there's a place to explain this. And, some of those schools that take the CSS profile will also require a non-custodial parent profile. You want to get me out of the weeds?
Just answer the God. No. So that was necessary. You're
Yes,
not in the
as a
weeds.
backdrop.
But what you have to describe now is the actual situation, the fact
And
pattern.
we have a few fact patterns in this way. So the problem that is coming up with using the 2015 or the prior income year is lots changed in 2 years. Now we're in 2017.
Lay out the facts.
Okay, so we have a marriage that we have a jointly filed return in 2015. We have a divorce in 2016, and it's now 2017, and the mother is completing the forms as the custodial parent, but it's demanding the 2015 information. How do you reconcile that? Because it's the IRS DRT isn't going to work then if you chop it up, and how do you handle it? Well, you definitely do not want to over-include anybody's income because it'll only work against you. So,
by the way, I will explain what all these acronyms mean when she's done.
Okay.
DRT.
I'd appreciate that. Okay. Well, I would think a lot of people at this point, unless you have juniors or younger, all right, I'll continue. So for our clients that since 2015's joint return have either separated or are divorced already, I use that custodial parent's income throughout, siphoning out from the 2015 income tax that which only pertains to that parent as best I can. Then.
So how'd you do that?
Well, how as between them?
How do you siphon?
Because I reviewed the tax return and saw income in W-2 ascribed to one parent versus the other, or in this case, where there was some self-employed ownership, whether any percentage of the ownership of that business was ascribed to both parties, in which case, and I do have one case this year, 50-50. That is the ownership breakdown. It just follows as if they're just two people who had income, but they were reported on this return together. Mm-hmm. So you separate it out. And obviously there is going to be a married joint return. That is the way you filed in 2015. Eventually there will be a time to explain that since then we're divorced, we're separated, the income that you're relying on from 2015 no longer applies. We have a completely different financial picture which looks like this.
So let me ask you this. So are you actually filling out the forms technically incorrectly but in the spirit of what they're asking for accurately?
Yes.
So that's the distinction.
That's correct. And if need be, there are what replaces the need for, let's say, the IRS DRT, which is a mechanism within the FAFSA that permits one to pull your tax return information directly from the IRS site into your FAFSA and then submit it to the school. And the schools deem that reliable because it's what you filed with the IRS. You're not just handing
let me just back
an unsigned copy of your return.
Okay, so there's the data retrieval tool, DRT, that is supposed to make life easier. And that works probably for 95% of families. But in this case, it would actually be misleading. That's what you're saying.
That is correct.
Because it would pull in the tax return, which has two incomes, and it should only have one income.
Correct.
In terms of, how this particular client should be evaluated in terms of her eligibility. So what you did was separate the income out.
Correct.
And then, so then could you use the DRT, the IRS data retrieval tool afterward?
You can.
Could you in this situation?
No. No, you can't, because it's not going to, unless you're going to pull in that other parent's income, which is not proper if you're separated or divorced. And so it's a nuance that the FAFSA system hasn't quite figured out. Nonetheless, the discussion of the change in circumstance as to these parents from the time of 2015 is going to happen nonetheless. So it might as well be based kind of on your terms, going that way, letting them be up front and center, know that there is a problem with that information that doesn't make sense, and therefore that school will need to follow up with you, as opposed to volunteering and throwing out all this income that is no longer attributable to you.
Okay. So we're in the weeds here a little bit, but this is very important because
there were a few, but there are
divorce is divorce is a very common situation, and I guess the main point here is that there are things that are technically correct and technical ways to fill out the FAFSA, but you also have to use a little bit of common sense, and what Pearl's giving you right now is a little bit of know-how to kind of game the system a little bit so that it's going to be less misleading.
Accurate, right?
Yeah, it's more accurate and less misleading, absolutely. If you are just joining us, I see a bunch of people coming on. Please say hi in the comments. Give us a question if you have one. We're talking right now about a specific fact pattern that pertains to more than one client recently, mostly for divorced families who have different circumstances when the FAFSA was filed compared to when the tax returns were filed 2 years prior.
So now I'll give you just some specifics about this one scenario. So for the few schools that this Sally submitted to, so she is a W-2 employee herself, and her ex-husband has a business that he makes money from. Unfortunately, Sally included all of his income on both on the forms.
Again, technically not a mistake, but misleading.
But and unfortunately, we'll put her in one scenario in the box to receive both need and merit-based aid, and the other way kicks her out of the box and would make her ineligible for need-based aid.
Yeah.
Yes.
So the mistake
correct.
that you caught took her from ineligible to eligible.
Right. And then there was another mistake. A lot of times people get confused, and this happens all the time, when figuring out that future income, that 2000 on the CSS profile, figuring it. This is for all parties, not just divorce situations. Do I count the gross income? Do I count the net income? How do I know? Do I include, the health insurance payments my company, the government, whomever is making on my behalf? How does that all work out? So I will just point out that in this particular case, until I was able to examine the W-2 and really see how she's paid and where the money comes from and the untaxed income and the retirement contribution, things that may escape most of us, I just live with it, she inflated her income artificially, unfortunately, close to $20,000. Confusing
gross and net.
Correct.
Okay.
That's right.
Yeah.
So, and that's separate and apart from, so I corrected that as well for
Great.
the remaining schools she has.
Okay.
And will be obviously, if the school she ends up really seriously considering in the end, that would certainly be a bone of appeal. If they got that, if
they issue an award that's bad, and we need to,
they didn't get it,
we need to say you made a mistake.
That's right.
Okay. All right. Good. All right. Let me talk a little bit about the client that I was speaking to, and so this is I think I talked about him last week a little bit too. His name is Mike, and his son's an athlete, and he's being recruited by one college that he wants to go to, but he was also interested at one point in the past in going to a different school, Lynchburg in Virginia. So he was not going to apply there at all, and Mike, the dad, said, don't bother sending the forms there, the financial aid forms. And I said, no, I'd like to get an offer from that school because we may be able to use that against the number one top choice college as leverage to play them off against each other. So what happened was he did, in fact, reach out to Lynchburg. He got them to send an award, although at first they said, well, we want you to come down here and interview for scholarship first to see if you're eligible for that. Mike tried to talk his son into doing that. It's kind of a pain to get down there, and it might only be about $1,000. So they made the calculated decision to not do that and notified Lynchburg and told them, no, we're not going to be able to come down there. As far as we can tell right now, can you please just send us the financial aid award? So what I just found out, because I found out partial information. What I found out was that Lynchburg did issue the financial aid award they were waiting for, so we could use that as leverage, which I'll describe, against the number one choice college. Mm-hmm. But when they sent it over to me, it was a link, and they said, here, log in. I can't log in. It never works. So if you're watching this, if you're a client, if you're not a client, and you're working with somebody else, for example, you want to show someone the award, you need to print it out or make a PDF or something and then send it over, because I don't know, the colleges might cookie the logins. They may not let other people log in, or possibly get the passwords wrong or something. How often does that happen to you with FSA ID
all the time.
and college board username?
More often than not.
Okay, right. So that's always like a little bit of a tactical tip there. It's a big time saver if you use your password, if you write your passwords correctly. So, but what I do understand is that the award is a lot better than what he got from his top choice school, and we're going to show that to his top choice school and the coach for the sport that this kid plays. And that is actually very similar to another client that we have, whose name I can use, because I think he's not on Facebook. Not James and Dave. I won't give their last names. Who's a football guy. The first one, Mike's kid, is a baseball guy, but the football guy is very interested in a school right outside of Boston, a small Division III school right outside of Boston, and he got an okay financial aid award. But I'd also suggested, hey, here's another couple of schools that you should apply to, and one of those was Bentley, which is a great business school outside of Boston. I don't know if he played football there, because I think they're Division II for football. And then Hobart, upstate New York, who gave him an incredible financial aid award. So what we did was I drafted up a letter to the top choice school outside of Boston, not Bentley, but the other one, and I suggested that this is the top choice school. But the family did, and I'm writing this as the dad, so we received a much better award from Hobart. Here's a copy of it, but we're only considering it because of financial reasons. There's no way at all that James wants to go to Hobart. He's dying to go to your college. So if there's any way at all that you could possibly reassess our award, then he's 100% committed to attending. If you could meet or even exceed this other award, please. And I suggested that he send it not only to the financial aid, but also to admissions and to the football coach. And what was interesting, I don't think I told you any of this stuff.
No.
What was interesting is, gratifying, is that Dave, the dad, said, we're not going to send it yet because the football coach told me to hold off. And I said, he probably wants to make sure that James really wants to go there before he sticks his neck out for him. And Dave, the dad, said, yeah, but he also wanted to look at the letter and make sure that it covered everything. And it turns out that it does. You covered everything that the coach said. So we're going to go send it. And so he sent it by email. I think he's mailing it by regular mail, snail mail also. So we're in the middle of seeing what's going to happen. But I feel, this is an exciting time, especially when it works out that way. So that's kind of an appeals update.
Very nice.
All right, talk about the student loans, and then we will wrap up and go to Valentine's
Day
lunch. Although you made the reservation for later. We can just show up earlier?
Yes,
okay.
we can.
Thank God.
Yes.
And if you're just joining, happy Valentine's Day.
Yes.
And, it's Pearl and Andy Lockwood here, College Talk Tuesday, special Valentine's edition. We talked a little bit about a couple of divorced families' case studies and how to correct a mistake on the FAFSA, and we talked about mistakes on the CSS profile a little bit.
Right.
We just talked about two case studies for appealing with student athletes.
And preventable costly mistakes.
Yeah, a couple preventable costly mistakes.
Yeah.
So if you have any questions and you're watching this live or you're watching this on distant replay, pop them into comments and we'll get in there. But please say hi. Let us know you're watching. Okay, so there's been a little bit of chit-chat about discharge of student loans, right? So what have you been watching on your 16 hours a day of Fox?
TV. Not only, I switch around.
80% Fox.
No. I like to be well-rounded.
Okay.
Okay. Well,
okay.
This in particular is not really so much about loan forgiveness, but there's an attempt, I think, nowadays to put common sense in some of the legislation. For example, there was a family, unfortunately, whose student had in excess of about $70,000 in student loans, had passed away. The parents first had to contend with still being obligated for those for the debt, until finally, after however many years, was able to be relieved of that debt in light of the fact that they have a dead child student. And now, and subsequent to that, the IRS hit them with a bill as having received that as income.
The discharge of debt.
The discharge of debt.
Okay,
nice.
So let's debate this a little bit. What do you mean common sense?
So in this particular case, I know that there is an appeal to be made that
to change the department regs?
To change, in situations like that.
Betty DeVos?
No, she wasn't involved
regs?
in this. This is not a support.
So what is this?
That in cases like that they would discharge this family of that debt, that obligation in light of the fact. Yes.
This is a tax thing?
This is a tax thing.
Okay.
It ended up being a tax thing. After first it was a student loan thing. And to the extent that,
let me ask you this.
Yes.
And again, I'm not, of course, as someone who, went through all sorts of crap with student loans myself, I'm not exactly, a defender. But common sense-wise, if you lent someone money and they died, does that mean you're out of luck?
Are you asking me as a lawyer, as a common sense?
Just common sense-wise. You invoke the common sense doctrine.
Well,
just because someone died on you doesn't mean they don't owe you the money anymore. That's
right.
Number one. And number two, when you have an obligation to pay something and you don't pay it back, there's, in every other part of life, it is. It
is. But is it the parents? The decedent's
whose is it?
Right. Well,
if you're the lender, why would you ever lend anyone money if you knew that they could just get out of it by dying? Everyone dies.
That is true.
I'm just saying.
That is true. I believe the student was in school when he died.
Yeah,
anyways,
does that matter? No, I don't know where
I don't know.
I don't know where I stand on this.
I
think it's.
I
think in terms of pure mercenary commercial, not Trump. I mean, he's much more pragmatic. And I don't even know if this is a Trump thing.
No,
this is really more of a.
It was just a Congress,
the IRS agency thing, a Congress thing.
Yes.
So I really see both sides of that argument. But
it involved.
No, but if you were just taking out all the emotional stuff and you were saying, listen, if you look at the incentives, if I were going to lend someone money and I knew that if they died or became whatever disabled, they could get out of paying me back, I might hesitate in doing that. Or I might, maybe I would track the rates up.
Unless it's like insurance, and you're hedging your bets that they're going to live a long time and make the payments to you.
Yeah.
So it's
I'm not an actuary, but
okay.
but I just think that I don't know if it's a common sense thing, like you said. I think there's common sense on both sides.
Yeah.
Huh.
How do you like that? I guess the real overall theme is it's important to examine things from all sides. Keep an open mind.
All right, well, we'll see. Listen, there's all these changes that might be floating around. That does not seem like a Trump administration change. I thought it was. Yeah, I thought it was. Yeah, interesting. But we're looking. Yeah, we're kind of seeing. Kind of eager to see what some of the new changes might be. I still think that Betsy DeVos is focused much more on high school stuff. On school choice and Common Core and. Maybe not Common Core, but definitely school choice.
So don't get too excited just yet. We're not.
Well, we'll see. Yeah,
one way or the other. Not getting rid of. We're not having free tuition just yet.
Well, that's a whole other thing. There's speaking of free tuition. So there was, in the state of New York, there's been a recent proposal. I guess I don't know if it's an actual bill yet. I believe it's not. But. Certainly announced by the government that he would like to make tuition free for everyone in the state of New York who initially is under $100,000 a year in adjusted gross income, and then it kind of ratchets up. And my comments about this a couple weeks ago were that, first of all, where's the money to do that? And in that proposal, he talked about it costing only like $168 million or something like that, and which made, well, for a state, which has a couple $1 billion of budget. I mean, if that's really
all where the money's going.
Well, if that's all it really takes, then why didn't they do it earlier? That was sort of like, that's how small it seemed to me. But I think they're underestimating the cost.
So.
The other thing though is if tuition becomes free, that's just tuition. So total cost of attendance at any state school in New York, roughly $26,000, and the tuition component is $6,000. So that's what would be covered under this proposal. So
it's kind of like the old shipping and handling costs. They're going to charge you some way
well, kids have
or
to
another
eat.
way.
I mean, listen, even if kids don't go to college, they still have to eat, and they still have to room somewhere. So those costs are, they're at college. But
that's true.
Anyway, so that's part of it. And then there was this article that came out. When was this? 3 days ago in the Wall Street Journal that talked about all these states that are continuing to cut their budgets and defund their respective state university systems. So I don't know how it's possible for most states in the country to, or I don't understand.
Consider.
Well, what makes New York so much different? If every other state in the country is cutting their budgets, how is New York going to increase their budget? The math doesn't add up to me so far. And I'm very, very curious to see who ends up paying for this and what exactly it looks like. And like I said, I don't think there's any bills yet that have been announced.
You mean it's just an idea?
It's just a pronouncement, I think. That's my understanding.
Okay.
Anyhow, so all this stuff is going to be changing, and this, it does have like a trickle down to our kids, and I think it's interesting to talk about. But the bottom line is that we're in the business of helping families navigate this process, both in terms of paying for college, which means scholarships and financial aid, like Pearl talked about, and getting into college and picking colleges.
Having
a plan, exactly. Not feeling like you're all over the place. Things change all the time, not just in the regulatory system and the, for states and federal, but also for families. So the example you gave was someone who got divorced in the middle of the whole process. I was just talking to a longtime client. I don't know if you saw the emails, Paul and Adrian, who they invited us to. I don't know if you saw that. We're going out with them in a few weeks in March. Yeah,
I'm looking forward to it.
And I thought I saw Paul. No. So they had a situation where, which is very common, where he's a lawyer. He's got his own firm, and his wife was a pretty highly paid sales executive, and she got laid off. And because she was one of the higher paid people in the company, which went under new management out of a place that is not here. It's somewhere in the Midwest, and they didn't really like her pushy New York attitude, perhaps, which means very productive. So that changed also. So he's in the middle of letting the two colleges that his kids are attending know about the change in circumstance, the drop in income, which again is not reflected in the
in what
tests.
you need to report.
Yeah, on the FAFSA and on the CSS profile, and yet there's another question which I kind of deferred to you, so you'll see that in your email, which has to do with the fact that he has his niece living with us.
Yes.
Which do you know that?
No.
Yeah, so we have that in common. Not his niece, but we have a niece living with us. And what's different though is that his niece moved in with them. He took her in because his brother was killed in a car accident in 2008, and they just convicted the driver in December, which was great, and she spoke at it and all this. So it's a really sad story. But the question is she a dependent of Paul and Adrian, or is she an independent? And I know there's when you do the FAFSA, there's all these boxes that you check and all that. So that's what I didn't know. So you're gonna get back to him on that. Will. And she's got Social Security income coming, but I don't see how she could possibly be considered an independent because they're supporting her.
Right. Well, there will be a couple of questions to that effect.
Okay, so you'll ask them that. Okay, good. All right, so that was great. Happy Valentine's Day to my bride and to everyone watching College Talk Tuesday. Thank you very much for watching. And coming up, we have my daily College Coffee Talk, which is a short, usually 5-minute or so video where I go through I don't think I'm ever going to get through them, but all the questions that we've gotten over the last 2 years when we started doing webinars and asking people, what's your burning question? So I have stacks and stacks of questions that we just simply never got to that I'm answering. So I'm doing that every day, and that's on the same Facebook page. And we've got more information on our website, collegeplanningGuru.com. You can go there and download a copy of How to Pay Wholesale for College, which was a best-selling book on financial aid and scholarships, plus our schedule of, we've been booking up speaking engagements. So I haven't told you, each time, but we just recently booked Syosset, the public library there, Oyster Bay, Belmore, I think I told you about. Trying to get it. We booked Garden City also, and we're also doing webinars. So we're live. We're mostly local for live stuff. Although I am journeying out to Riverhead sometime in the near future. So I'm really trying to get out there. If you know anyone, if you're a PTA mom, PTA president, we do a bunch of those presentations too. I'm happy to speak to your group. Just pop something on here in chat. In the comments, or just reach out to the office. You can call us. That number is if you hit call now on the page here, you'll get our phone number also. So if you need us for any of that college planning stuff.
Yep.
Yeah, the whole college planning thing. That's how you can reach us. So thanks a lot for watching. Pearl, any last bits of wit or wisdom?
Nope. Happy Valentine's Day.
All right. Bye everyone. Thanks for watching.